gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So I was listening to Marc Maron's WTF from Monday. He had John Mulaney on. And, that's always a good time. And I was caught off guard, though, during the opening prattle, where he, Marons for 20 minutes straight, usually. He dropped the news that he will be ending the show. It's ending of its own volition. He said that they're going to keep running it to the fall sometime. And they're going to pull the trigger after almost 16 years, or it will be 16 years by then, I think. Since 2009, it's been running. I've been listening almost the whole time. I think I jumped in somewhere around 2011 or 12. Not dedicated every week. I go through phases with it. It's kind of refreshing to see someone stepping away of their own choice. And they haven't worn out their welcome or run things down. Very interesting though, kind of refreshing, I guess, but it will be weird to not have it there. It's always been such a rock.
That's unfortunate. I hadn't heard that. I definitely, get that temptation to want to walk away from something with a little bit of dignity, not necessarily run it into the ground. I know, most rappers that I've seen do that, kind of hang it up. They end up coming back, or it's I don't know. It just seems like with a podcast, I guess it makes sense because it's something you do every week or however regularly. This one I do every day. So I can understand it. What it probably is that it's not growing, the way it once did maybe. And, so he has his audience, but he also has his audience that comes out to shows, and, he has other means and ways to, advance his career. He's doing good acting gigs now, and he may not have to do that many jobs to keep things going. But I don't know, podcast seems like pretty steady revenue for a guy at his stature. So it seems to me that, maybe it was just not having the momentum that he had at one point, which I think is kind of unfortunate because, the podcast space is so dominated by people like Joe Rogan now. And Marc Maron, was before Rogan on the podcast tip. He has been doing it for a long time. And he was pretty much the first when it came to comedians to really build an audience doing a podcast and make a way forward in his career by doing that, which now is the standard. Especially as a comedian, you start a podcast, it's a way to get yourself in front of people, and that won't necessarily carry you to fame, but if you have a name, it can give you an audience that consistently shows up for you. And Marc Maron was one of the first people to establish that at a point where his career, he's talked about, he was at the bottom of the barrel at that time in his career, and really was just grasping at straws and was kind of wrestling with the idea of just being a mediocre comedian, and that was his career path. And then starting the podcast was something that allowed him to breathe new life into his whole career. And I think that he doesn't need that anymore. He has a great career, and that's what I find inspiring about Marc Maron. He used to talk about what a failure he felt like, and how certain opportunities just weren't meant for him, and he just things like that, and all the resentments that he had about it. And then now he's accomplished most of those things, and he's done it in his own way where he's not, he doesn't represent anything other than what he represents. And it's unfortunate that we're losing him in the podcast space because he's always been a pretty left-wing voice too. I mean, I don't think he cares that much about politics in terms of putting it at the forefront, but he's always been pretty consistent on the left-wing commentary side, and he was doing Air America back in the day with Sam Cedar, and so he was on the cutting edge of that in a lot of ways. And I guess that type of commentary didn't provide the relevance that they were looking for at the time. And so I don't know, it's just kind of stark given that Joe Rogan is running strong, and there's some talk about his numbers slipping a little bit, and I've seen some talk about that. So, maybe he doesn't have all the relevance now that he used to have either, but he certainly, is carrying the conversation still. And it's a shame that people like Marc Maron, aren't the ones with that type of platform. And I do feel like there's a little bit of defeatedness in it, kind of like I wish he would stay in the game because we need voices like Marc Maron. But I can understand if he feels like he's not, making an impact the way he used to, because I think that also is probably true.
Yeah, that part does make it extra sad, losing another voice on the left like that. And he has been more and more political these days. Certainly not a Trump fan. And when it seemed more and more likely he was going to get elected, Mark was coming a little unhinged. But I didn't get an air of defeat from him at all in the explanation of why he was ending it. More exhaustion than anything else. And to be fair, him and Brendan have been doing this, twice a week for the last 16 years. And, it gets old. I'm sure they're worn down, could really use a break if nothing else. But also for a good year or two now, he's been joking around that he's already interviewed everyone, He's done 2,000 episodes. And unlike some people, he does not do a lot of repeat guests. It happens, but it's pretty rare. He is definitely the OG, you're right about that. 16 years, I can't even think of any other comedy podcast close to that old, except maybe Adam Carolla's might have started around then, but I don't know if that really counts as comedy. But yeah, for a long time, it was just like him, and he was, one of the first people I think I ever had a parasocial relationship with. Like, I really think I know the guy. I think that's one of his appeal, or things that appeals about him is just how sincere and genuine he feels. And like those first few years, especially when he was getting that podcast together, it was like watching someone try and like hold a car together while going down the highway and like just barely keeping himself together. And you've kind of seen him grow and become a more like grounded whole person over the years. And watched him through ups and downs and stuff like that. He's had some great success and really, found a lot of that, what he was looking for in his career with the podcast. And then some huge tragedies with Lynn passing and stuff. That was one of the things that brought me back to the podcast for a minute when I heard about that. And having gone through something similar myself, it was interesting to listen to someone go through that so raw and real. I'm certainly going to miss that. And he's joked that he won't have a social life anymore, that the podcast was like his key to that. And I'm sure that we'll see more from him. He even said that, just because it's ending doesn't mean that you won't see conversations like this or similar format stuff come from him anymore. I imagine it'll be something like David Letterman or Conan, where it takes some time off, and then you'll see a very similar product come out later that's a little more relaxed, and he's already completely in control of this, but something just a little easier pace that he can put out here and there. I'm sure we'll see more from him, and I'm looking forward to that. He deserves a break for sure. One thing I'm looking forward to not having to hear anymore, I should say, is I've been pretty patient with him. I listened to the self-indulgent guitar playing at the end all the way through. It's actually grown on me. I like it. But the way he signs off at the end with the Boomer Lives, Monkey and LaFonda, Cat Angels Everywhere, I get it. It's sweet, but it is so cringy. It's just like one step better than Joe Rogan's old Hello Freak Bitches that drove me so fucking insane. That I'm not going to miss so much.
Well, yeah, I guess that's the point of doing all this for so long and building such a consistent audience in so many different parts of your career, is that, at some point you don't have to do like constant output anymore. And I guess it is crazy that the era that we're in demands that. And I do think you see a lot of the older comedians kind of rejecting that and be like, no, I don't have to put out constant amounts of material just to compete. Even though it seems like I have to do that, I don't. So that's fair, I think. But I do also feel like now is the time to compete because, I know Maron is like, I don't know, he probably just He's been in the game for a long time. He's dabbled in the political stuff, but I don't know. It's just never had that. Like he did the interview with Obama, and that was a big deal. But I guess, you know, that wasn't like a critical interview, which it could have been. But, you know, that wasn't really what he was trying to do at the time. But I don't know. I guess what I'm getting at is like, I wonder how Maron could have sailed a little bit higher when it comes to the political impact specifically, because that's what I feel like if he was really on fire in terms of the shit he's saying is roiling the discourse, even if he's been doing it for a while, like he would keep going if he was, you know, really making a splash, because I know he's somebody that like believes in things, even though he might be a bit cynical. So it just makes me wonder like what it is about Joe Rogan's platform or others like it that is dominating the space so much more. I think some of it is fabricated, you know what I mean, or boosted. I saw that one of the guys that beat Joe Rogan in the charts one day was a guy named Sean Ryan, the Sean Ryan Show. And this guy's like a CIA contractor or something, and he's like affiliated with some weird groups. So just like obvious CIA guy going on there. So the podcast space is weird. And, you know, I don't blame somebody for wanting to get out of it, but also like there definitely has to be, if they're not controlling the narrative in that space, they're definitely like really, really hammering away at it and strengthening a narrative that is like really taking hold in society. And so I know that's the kind of thing that a guy like Marc Maron wants to counter. And I guess it just raises the question of how to do that effectively. I guess what Joe did that Maron didn't do as much is he kept having politicians on and other people, you know, sort of in that realm and kooks and all that. But from a sort of friendly, light interview perspective for the most part. Like he'll argue with people sometimes, but that's kind of what Maron did with Obama. Is he did like, you know, pretty light interview with him, maybe some poking here and there, but not much. And, you know, maybe if Maron kept doing that type of shit, he could have achieved the same type of relevance. And I feel like maybe he shied away from that because he was like, yeah, you know, that was fun talking to the president and all that, but this political shit is heavy. And, you know, he's just a fucking thoughtful, responsible person. So he thinks about the consequences of being involved in the political realm. Whereas a guy like Joe Rogan's just like, I don't know, I just like to talk to people on my freaking podcast, man. And that's the world we're living in where that just works better.
Yeah, you're probably right. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, what Maron's most focused on has always been Maron, you know, like to the point where it's almost a joke now. Like when I say he's been a lot more political lately, I mean, he's been freaking out about the country falling apart and possibly going into a civil war and how he won't be able to tour anymore and stuff like that. It's all still very focused on Maron. Like, sure, this is the episode where he announced that he was retiring the show, but also he, within 5 minutes of the actual Mulaney interview, after the 20-minute Maroning at the beginning, within 5 minutes, he had redirected the entire show to being about him and it ending. Like, he might as well call the show, So What Do You Think of Me? You know, like, but he does have a lot going on right now. He just co-starred in a Apple TV series for their Apple streaming service with Owen Wilson. He's been being followed around for years by this documentarian guy, and I guess the first cut of that's done and premiering at some film festival. And then now he's wrapping the show up. He's got a new HBO special coming out. I feel like, you know, maybe this isn't peak for him, but it's probably close to it. And that Sean Ryan guy you said is interesting. I didn't know he beat Rogan. I think the Midas touch one day. I mean, I remember a very hardcore lefty friend of mine freaking out because I've never heard of these guys, but apparently it is a very left-wing podcast, specifically anti-Trump. I don't know, but they beat Rogan one week or something, supposedly. And a lot of times it's people like who have a gimmick podcast, like Haley Welch when she was doing the Talk to a podcast or whatever. They come out and, you know, for that initial week, they'll knock him out of the top spot, but then he goes right back up to it, right? I mean, he's still, unfortunately, got his meathead legion following him.
Yeah, the Midas Touch boys, they kind of came up out of the like resistance Twitter movement, which was like, you know, a bunch of liberals on Twitter that, you know, follow for follow, we're going to take down the president, very much attached to the Mueller investigation and, you know, pushing for that. And so obviously the position of the institutions are going to defeat Trump is a pretty demoralized position at this point. But there's a fair amount of like influencers that came out of that movement or whatever. And the Midas Touch, I believe, or some of them, I think maybe they have like a law background or something. I think they got a little bit of money behind them. So they created this network. And, you know, the only thing that makes me a little skeptical about them topping Joe Rogan on some chart, supposedly, is that, you know, that was at the time where it's like, who's the new liberal Joe Rogan, right? Like, what's going to be the counter to that? Because recognizing not only is Joe Rogan a powerful force, but he's pretty firmly on the right at the moment. And so, you know, liberals are like, we need a liberal version of that, as though that's, you can't answer Joe Rogan that way. First of all, because the reason Joe Rogan has the audience he has is because he did not come from a political background. So some plant that is, you know, explicitly tied to the Democratic Party is not going to do the trick. But, you know, I think there was probably a lot of promotion involved in, you know, them trying to make a big push. We're going to take over. So, you know, if they're competitive in the space and they're putting good information, that's one thing, you know, that I like about liberals, like, you know, except when it comes to issues of like war, is they put out good information. They're basing their thought processes on good information. And so if there's more people filling up the podcast space, putting out good information, that's a good thing. But that being said, you know, the Midas Touch boys, I think, are a little toothless. I think that's reflective of that resistance movement they came up from. You know, it's all a bit toothless, a bit too focused on, you know, the institutions are going to do the job for us, and not so much imagination outside of that. So is that going to be the answer, the cultural shift that we need away from the Joe Rogans of the world? Probably not. But, you know, more power to them. And until we come up with a better answer for Joe Rogan, then fuck it, I'm on board. Midas Touch all the way. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. I'm posting different kinds of exclusive content there, like podcasts that don't make it to the main channel. Also music. I've got a new EP out right now called Dead Internet Theory, which is now available on all platforms. And that was available first for members only. I also re-released a previous EP called Spaceman Spliff. That's available now on the main channel with a bonus track included. And that was also available first for members only. So if you're interested in early access to music, go ahead and become a member. And if there's other types of content that you'd like to see as exclusive content, let me know and we'll figure some things out.